Now you're welcome back. Again, if you're just tuning in, it was 0-0 in Budapest, Hungary 0, Republic of Ireland 0. We are turning our attention to Scottish football. Obviously, the Euros around the corner, and also Celtic have made an appointment which caught most of us, I think, by surprise. To tell us more, we have Natasha Meikle with us from the A Celtic State of Mind podcast. Natasha, great to have you on.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, not the name Celtic fans were expecting. We thought Eddie Howe was in, and then Ange Postecoglou has been appointed as Celtic manager. He's currently over in Yokohama, Australian. So that raised an eyebrow from lots of people, I would suspect.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't the name we expected. I think everyone, the Celtic fans, the media, probably the club itself, were pretty sure that Howe was going to get the job. And that was an appointment that was universally backed by the fans. So to go from that option, which we thought was a cert, and to move to a relatively unknown manager from the A-League and J-League was always going to be met with a bit of a difficult response, and it's certainly one that took a lot of people by surprise.
He's 55 years of age. What are you hearing about him?
Do you know, it's interesting. I think what we saw initially was a bit of what the Australian journalists are calling Euro snobbery. We don't know about the A-League over here. We don't know about the J-League. And we're quick to write them off as not being of good quality. But what's really interesting is if you listen to the people who do know him, the people who know the A-League, the J-League, Australian football, who know his career, they're all really positive about this appointment. And what they tell us about his football philosophy and his setup is encouraging. And I think it aligns with the way that Celtic fans want to see the club play. You look at how he's set up at Yokohama, they play attacking football. They've got high fullbacks overlapping the wingers. They play the ball out from the back. And he seems to have this sort of philosophy that typical, if you score 3, we'll score 4 sort of mentality. Apparently they're a little susceptible at the back on the break. But I think that works for Celtic. And I think that's the sort of football that Celtic fans want to see the team play. So while perhaps it's, initial disappointment and losing out on Howe, I think we're beginning to see that dissipate and give way to cautious optimism in terms of Postecoglou.
Because I saw Gordon Strachan went out to bat for him majorly on TalkSport in the last couple of days. He said the fact is that Ange is coming in. If you actually look at what he does and the people who've worked with him, you're talking about a top manager here. There's no point asking the pundits. They've never watched him play. They've never seen his training. They've never seen his teams. They've never spoken to his players. Ask the players who've worked with him as a coach and you'll find the truth. And I know a couple of years ago, Brendan Rodgers on a pre-season trip was effusive about him, saying he's outstanding. I've had a couple of chats with him, and to see his team play, he's very similar to myself, and he believes the game should be played in a certain way. That's when Rodgers was Liverpool manager. So you've got a couple of people there in the game saying very nice things about him. I guess it might beg the question, without indulging in some more Euro snobbery, why haven't we seen him at a bigger European club before?
It's a very good question, and if he is as good as people like Brendan Rodgers, even Pep Guardiola, speak about him or have spoken about him in the past, if he is that good, then why hasn't he made it into European football? I think if you listen to the journalists over there, what they say is that he's been on the brink of this, that he's been on the brink of an appointment in Europe for some time, and that he just has needed the break, and that the Australian market and the Japanese market in terms of the managers there is a relatively untapped resource from a European perspective. So it just needs some innovative thinking, a bit of, outside of the box to make this approach. And Celtic are going to be the team to do that. It's either going to go one of two ways. We're going to get the plaudits for looking slightly differently, for trying something a little different and it working greatly. Or we're going to see there's a reason that he's not made it to Europe before. Of course, I certainly hope it is the former.
Any sense of what type of personality he is, Natasha?
Well, the one thing that Celtic fans are adamant that he shouldn't be is a yes man. And from watching some of his interviews and listening to him speak to the media, I think it is fair to say that that is not his type of character. He seems to be very typically Australian, which I quite like, and I think that'll go down well in Scotland, and I think the fans will like to see his approach to the Scottish media, because I don't think he takes any nonsense. I think he's quite tough. I think he's quite competitive, and I think that's the sort of person we need. We just look at the job he's got in his hands. Someone coming in who knows that they were not first choice. Celtic's statement about Eddie Howe made it very clear that Eddie Howe was the first choice. Anyone coming in now knows that they're second choice. And that's very difficult, from a personal perspective, because every result, every criticism levied at you is that you are not Eddie Howe. So it's going to take a strong character to step into that and achieve under that. But I think Postecoglou is that sort of character, which is good because that's what we need.
Yeah. So to international football, now have a bit of sympathy for us. The highlight of our footballing summer was a friendly we've just played in Budapest, which finished 0-0. That was kind of as good as it got in many ways. Next Monday, so 6 days' time, Scotland are underway against the Czech Republic. Hampden Park, 2:00. I mean, that'll be pretty awesome. Are fans in Hampden Park for this?
Yes, some. There's limited crowd, but there'll be some there.
Okay, excellent. It's been a long time. 1998 feels like a long time ago, so it's good, I'm sure, for you guys to be back. If you had to kind of give a broad summation of how this has happened, I mean, I'm sure Stevie Clarke gets a lot of credit, and it does seem like a very nice generation of players have come through. What's happened over the last couple of years here?
You know what I think you've touched on there about the new generation. What's exciting about this Scotland squad is that there's an overriding feeling that this has been a new start. What we're seeing is these new players coming through and the dawn of something good in Scottish football, and that's what started to be established over the last couple of years, which has sort of reached its peak now. And now we're looking at this sort of new look Scottish team with glimmers of future stars and players like Turnbull and Gilmore and Patterson. And the difference now compared to previous years is we've got a team littered with players that are used to winning in Scotland for the big clubs, and combining that with players who are playing in the top 6 in England at a really competitive level. So the standard of Scotland's player has increased. I think we've seen the old guard sort of slowly be phased out over the last few years, giving way to these younger future stars that I've mentioned. And I think from a Scottish perspective, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm sure. So look, I mean, there's a lot of names here that are really obviously very familiar to us when we're watching the Premier League week in, week out. Tierney is there. So Stevie Clarke's kind of 5 at the back territory. Tierney, one of the centre halves, with Robertson as left wing back. I think McTominay's had a brilliant season in a quiet way. Like, he's got better again. There's such parallels with him and Darren Fletcher. I know it's easy because he's blonde and he's Scottish and he's midfielder, but I think he's really grown into himself. McGinn, obviously an excellent player. So who are the names maybe that might surprise us if we're not watching the Scottish Premier League all that often?
Do you know, I am quite excited to see David Turnbull get some time. He didn't play a lot at the start of the season for Celtic, but he played, you know, sort of from December onwards and still managed to get Celtic's player of the season despite only having had half a season. I don't think he'll start regularly, but I think when we do get to see him, we are going to get to see glimpses of a really good talent there who's going to have a brilliant career for Celtic and for Scotland.
And what about Steve Clarke then? What's he done, in your opinion, to get things moving in the right direction?
I think it's the mentality around the Scottish team. I think in the past we have been so guilty of being negative about our team, of so guilty of it being so close but yet so far. And I think what Steve Clarke has introduced is a real sense of optimism. You know, there's a real sense of optimism around the squad at the moment and what they can actually achieve at the Euros. Of course, it's coupled with an inevitable sense of realism.
Yeah.
But the aim for the Scottish team was to get invited to the party. Now that we're there, I hope we can enjoy it. And I think that what Steve Clarke has done is introduced this fresh mentality that we can go out and not only enjoy it, but actually achieve something and get some good results in this group.
So Czech Republic, Hampden Park, and then 4 days later, I think this will be on a Friday, so this will just get a huge audience Friday evening. England, Wembley Stadium, 8:00, and then 4 days after that, Croatia back at Hampden Park, 8:00. I mean, it ain't easy. So when you say there's realism in Scotland, is it genuine realism, or are people now starting to talk themselves into, well, we got to get off to a winning start, maybe we'll beat one of England, Croatia, draw with the others, we could go all the way here? How realistic is the realism?
Of course, the maths has all been done, the various permutations of how the group could end up as being done, and we're doing everything we can to see how Scotland can qualify out of it.
We did the same thing at Euro 2012, and it's a terrible idea to do that.
It's the hope that kills you, it is. But you know what, I think we do have to remember that it's an incredible achievement to have got here, to get these games, to get to a major tournament, and for the whole country to enjoy them. But in saying that, you know, let's look at it. I think if we are to get anything from this group, the first game is probably going to be a must-win for that to happen. But in saying that, out of the group, the Czech Republic is probably a good place to start. You know, they've underperformed in recent times, and Scotland are coming off the back of, you know, a couple of of pretty good results. And then, of course, following that, we come up against England. And you talk to any Scottish fan right now, and they fancy their chances against England. We would love that. And you know what else? England don't have the best start. They start against Croatia. So there's no guarantee of 3 points there. That's no gimme. So let's take the perspective that Scotland win our first game, England drop points. The psychological advantage of going in ahead of them to that game against them could be key. And Scotland do well when we're considered underdogs. In recent times, we've held our own against England, so I don't see why we can't go and get a result in that game, and then that sets us up in an excellent position for the final game of the group.
Yeah. Who's the goal scorer, Natasha? Who's going to get goals for Scotland here? Or is that a dilemma?
You know, the thing I'm worried about is the lack of cutting edge up front. I think we'll be solid at the back. You've identified, some real good players that we've got at the back, but up front, I do think we lack a cutting edge, and we saw it against Luxembourg. I really was hoping to see a bit more from them in that game, especially when they went down to 10 men and we just didn't have that cutting edge. I think probably Shea Adams is a great addition. I think him perhaps combined with Dykes up front could be where the goals come from. But I think if you're looking at the Scotland squad, you're saying it's solid at the back, lack of cutting edge up front. And I think on that basis, our games are probably going to be quite nervy, tight affairs, probably not many goals in it. But we will see. I'd be happy with a goal from anywhere on the pitch at this rate.
Yeah. And Shea Adams, so he's English born. When did he come on board?
Just for this campaign.
Yeah.
So he is very newly Scottish, but we welcome him with open arms, and if he scores goals at the Euros, then he'll certainly be even more welcomed.
Yeah. So he's 24 years of age. So was he part of the qualification campaign?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
And he just joined up for that. And he get good. He offered something that we don't have up front. So, in the first sort of few games, in terms of qualifying, we've been, in terms of striking options, you're looking at players like McBurney, who's obviously missed out through injury. Lee Griffiths played a role at some point, but we've never really had that quality up front and that's something that the Scotland team have been missing.
Yeah.
Obviously, in recent times, Dykes is declared for Scotland, so he's been a great addition. Shea Adams looks to be that that bit of quality in terms of attack. So I think we are addressing it with non-Scottish born players, but I think together they could combine really well.
Okay, very good. Natasha Meikle, thanks so much, Natasha. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers. That's Natasha Meikle there from a Celtic State of Mind podcast.